living in kingdom culture. Last week we spoke at length on the attributes of a kingdom, and I'm sure we'll probably appreciate a bit more, what kingdoms look like and how that relates to us when we refer to ourselves as kingdom citizens and kingdom leaders. I did say last week that when we say kingdom citizens, indirectly we are inferring that kingdom citizens are actually leaders, because the whole business of kingdoms is ruling or leadership. So I will want to go on that note and see some of the bases of life in a kingdom, how that applies to us with respect to culture. So I've titled this, let's say sub note on it, which says keys to effective kingdom living. So I'm going to just share my screen so that we can begin to look at that and see how this actually, what this means in our context. Okay, so we're going to carry on with that, and as I begin to continue in this discourse. Okay, I'll just switch my screen very quickly and we'll carry on. Now, to start with, I want to talk about the power of ideas. Now, I'm aware that we've said a few things about this in the past, but I think we can carry on to say a lot more about ideas, especially from the perspective that everything that we know in the world or in life begins with as an idea. And that's very true. That's everything that we do. Sometimes we want to take on a course. Even this presentation that we are on now on the Executive Network began as an idea. Now, we also know that the source and the seed of everything in the visible and invisible world is an idea. That's very true. And all of us can actually allude to that. Now, but I'll begin to go on in this thinking because I'm actually attempting to go in a particular direction tonight. Now, our minds is actually the place where we, interact with ideas from the point of generating ideas or receiving the ideas of other people or processing those ideas and transferring those ideas. All of those are initiated either through or they pass through the mind. So the mind is effectively the medium. Now, talking about the mind, one thing I want to quickly say about the mind is that we know that the mind consists of essentially three things. The first being the intellect, the second, the emotion, and the third being the will. So the mind is perhaps the most powerful tool in the whole human body. Of course, we know that without the body, the mind is useless. Without the spirit, the mind is probably also useless. But the mind takes, it takes a central role in between each of those three tiers of existence in a human. And we're looking at how, the place of the mind in the whole process of idea management. Now, we know that ideas actually reside in the conscious and subconscious mind. Now, what do I mean by this? When I say ideas reside in the conscious and subconscious mind, okay, now I'm going to use my own discipline as maybe a way to look at this. Now, many of us will probably have done a lot of work on the computers. Let's say you're working on a Word document. Now, if we open the Word document on the computer, if you just follow me in your mind, and we open that Word document on the computer and begin to type a few things. Let's say we want to write a letter. After finishing that letter, if we just want to now get out of the computer, out of the Word program, and we click close. Something happens. The computer says, are you sure you want to close this document? Do you want to save it so that your work is not lost? Okay. Now, we have two options, either to say, well, ignore and just close it. If we do that, all that has been done is lost. So we can say, right, I want to save this work that I've spent a few minutes to do. And the moment we click save, there is something that the computer prompts us to do. It says, tell me the label or the title you want to give to this document. Right. Once we do that and we click on save, the document goes away from, well, it goes into another layer in the computer. Now, I want to describe those layers. In the first instance, when we are working on that document, it works in an area where we call the memory. It's just a random access or a random area memory of the computer. The moment we click on save and we actually save it, it goes from the memory of the computer into the hard drive. Okay, now I'm saying all this because I want to try to explain a concept that when we have ideas in our minds and we're just playing with them, we just maybe a thought just came in, we can choose to just ignore the thought and just ignore it, and it goes away and it's not really registered in our mind. But at some other times we want to say, look, this idea is actually worth a lot of attention, and I want to really think about it furthermore and keep it in my mind, or I begin to really believe in this idea. Something happens. Our mind is beginning to accept the idea, and we effectively save the idea. Now, when we are thinking about that idea in the first instance, it's just in our conscious mind. The moment we actually say, I want to accept this idea and I actually believe this idea, it goes from our conscious mind into our subconscious mind. Now, the subconscious mind is that area that we normally refer to as our heart. So, and that's one thing I want to say, that it's something that the place where ideas are kept, once we believe them, is actually referred to as our heart. Now, sometimes when I debate with people and I say, well, what exactly is the heart? Some people may refer to the heart as that organ in the chest. And I always say, look, I disagree, because that organ that we have in our chest does nothing other than to pump blood. That is not where thoughts are kept. That's not where ideas are generated. The ideas are generated in our brain and in a region that we call the mind. And when an idea is believed or turns into a belief, it goes into the subconscious mind, and we call that the heart. So all of that resides just in the head of every typical human. And I wanted to just lay that foundation because I'm hoping to build on that one as we go on. Now, thoughts are seeds of ideas. In other words, every idea begins as a thought. And when that thought is fully conceived or is conceived partly, it becomes what we call an idea. Now, the heart itself, where those ideas are stored, or where belief is stored and is stored, becomes a fountain of thoughts. In other words, certain thoughts generate based on our beliefs, our belief system. Now, I also want to suggest this, that actually every thought that we have in our minds actually stay with us. In other words, a man's beliefs, a man's thoughts are always with the man. And if eventually they form the basis of action, the basis of all that we do. So, and in time, we begin to express those thoughts as words or action. But as I was thinking about this, it occurred to me that when we have ideas in our mind, we can hold a thought in our mind, but disguise our intent by either using words that are untrue or actions that are not quite representative of the thought we have in our heart. So it is actually possible to disguise thought through words and actions. But whilst that is being done, we know that the thought that is in the heart, which is unexpressed, cannot actually be disguised. In other words, everybody knows what is true in his or her heart. So when I begin to say something, if I say what I don't quite mean, right inside of me, I know what I meant, even if I don't quite say it. So that's why if somebody tells a lie, he knows that the truth is inside of him, even though he has expressed it in a different way. So that's why I just said that, yeah, actually, thoughts can be, even though they are expressed in words and action, but they can actually be disguised. They can be misrepresented or represented differently. But an unexpressed thought cannot be disguised. Why? It is in the mind, and the mind knows exactly what it's thinking about. Now, so thoughts can only be disguised in the course of expression. Only when we express thoughts can we actually disguise them. Now, but true intent of thought only exists in the mind. What does this mean? So, which means when somebody has spoken to me and I really want to know what the person has in his or mind, by the time I, maybe go to the person and really try to dig deeper, I can begin to see what the person actually has in his or mind, even if what he has said or the way he acts is untrue. I suppose that's why we do, that scientists do a lie detector test. What they're trying to do is to go beyond the actions and the words, to go into, to read the the waves of the mind, just to kind of try and go as close as possible to the real intent in the mind. Now, I don't want to beat this so much because I'm just using this concept to build on a concept I want to advance as we go on. Now, because unexpressed thought in the heart is actually the original thought that is kept in the heart, I want to suggest that a man and his thought are actually one and the same. So if I'm thinking about something, and that is really what I believe, my belief is really who I am. I suppose that's why in scriptures we will see a word that says that as a man thinks in his heart, so is the man. So in other words, whatever I think is exactly the truth about me. I can behave differently, but my thought is exactly who I am. Okay. Now that's why sometimes based on action we can call people certain names. You can say, "Oh, he's a liar." Now, lie is in his heart, and what he does also measures up to that. If somebody does an act of goodness, we say, "Oh, he's a good person," only because the thought in his heart and what he expresses as action seem to correlate. All right. Now, I'm hoping this will become um, more uh, become clearer as we go on. Right. Now, talking about expression of ideas. Now, I want to say that words are expressed thoughts or reasons or intent. I was looking this up in the dictionary earlier on, and I actually went ahead to check the word logos, which is a Greek word, which means expressed word or reason. So words are basically the way we express our thought. Now, if I have a thought in my heart or in my mind, no one can know what I'm thinking about unless I speak or unless I act. I guess that's the whole point of all that I'm saying here. Now, I want to compare this with when we talk about in the context of the kingdom of God, right? Now, we see in a place where God says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Meaning that, okay, the Word existed right from the beginning, and it was already in God. Now, but we know that that word, the word WORD, is actually the word logos, which means an expressed word or expressed reason, or let's call it expressed thought. So, which means God has a thought at some point, and it began to express it as logos. So, which means it's impossible to know what God had in his mind until he expressed it. Just about the same way that it's impossible to know what I have in my thought until I begin to express it or I begin to act. Now, whether my action or my word is true is another thing. But when I begin to act or speak, I begin to express or reveal my thought, what I'm thinking about. The same way, God also, whatever he had in his mind, we may not be privy to it, but by what he began to do, we can begin to actually begin to attempt to understand what he actually has in his mind. Now, this is so true in the context of this verse of scripture, or this verses of scripture in John. It says that, look, in the beginning, the word existed, the word was with God, and the word was God. Okay, that's just to say that a man and his word are one and the same. Okay, now the word existed in the beginning with God. That's fine. Now, through him, that is through the word, all things were made, and so on and so forth. Now, the point I'm making is that point where it says that word actually became flesh, or came alive, and was now dwelling with mankind. Now, I was trying to understand this, and it began to occur to me that actually all that God thought, he began to express as his word, and that he also began to express in human form, so that we can now understand how to live. I was checking again the word light, and the word light in Greek terms simply means guidance, or it means knowledge. It means know-how. So basically, the word became life that shows men how to live. And that's what that statement, in him was life, and that life brought light to humanity. In other words, the actual way to live was in the word, in God's thought, and when it was expressed, it shows men how to live. It shows humanity how to live. And it means that regardless of the state of any human, if we take the guiding light of the word and apply it, then we can always get out of every situation. This is the way I interpret this. Now, we're not into theological discourse, but I'm looking at this because I'm going at something. I'm going towards a thought. When the Bible says that the word became flesh and dwelt among us, it was effectively referring to Jesus. So we can begin to conclude that Jesus was actually God's idea expressed in flesh. In other words, Jesus was simply God's idea about how humanity should live. So whatever we see in Jesus is exactly what God was thinking about how he wanted men to live. Now, I will go a bit further back and look at the man Adam. And we know a bit about Adam, how the Holy Scriptures were saying he was able to do so many things, including naming all of the created beings. Now we don't know so much about Adam beyond that, but whatever God intended for humanity when he made Adam, we begin to see by Jesus' actions. So whatever Jesus did effectively reveals what God had in mind about every man, about mankind as a whole. So if Jesus said anything, or if he acted in a particular way, that simply showed us what God's idea about that thing was. So if Jesus spoke about mankind, Whatever he said, or however he treated or acted or interacted with uh, the people of his day, begins to give us a tiny window into what God's idea really are when it comes to mankind. Why is this important? Well, we know that the truth about any product is always in the mind of the manufacturer, and manufacturers will express their thought as word in a manual. So they will write all of that in a manual and ship that out with the product so that any user of the product doesn't have to guess about how to use that product. So even though the manufacturer may be thousands of miles away, I can pick his manual and begin to know his mind about his product. In the same way, I see Jesus as, right, this is mankind. Well, even whether or not you've forgotten how to live, let me send you my parcel. Let me express my thought again in human form and ship him out to you, so that by looking at him, you can begin to understand again how you ought to live. Now, it even occurs to me that if I have a piece of electronics, and let's say I bought it 5 years ago. Now, if something begins to go wrong in that electronic and I want to resolve it, what most of us will do is we will go back into the box that contains the manual, which we might have kept away in the loft of the house or in the storage room, and dig the box out and bring out the manual in an attempt to begin to now know how to resolve the matter. So which means no matter how far gone we are, when we need to correct matters, we usually go back to the manual. If we can't find it, we then either send it back to the manufacturers or go to some other sources to find the information, or take it to those who know enough about that product to fix it. Okay, now it looks to me, therefore, that all of God's ideas that were expressed in Jesus ought to be man's default strategies to life, or default approaches and perspective to life. Now, I mean, I hope you're going to see where I'm coming from. So now, if we are attempting to imitate God's actions, all we need to do, therefore, is to learn his own express idea, that is Jesus, and begin to see how did he act, what did he say about a particular subject, a particular topic, or the other. Now, in the first instance, because we're talking about kingdom, community, and culture, we begin to look at Jesus. So if he says, look, you guys are not, you have not been to where I was. I'm from above. I came down to meet you. Now let me show you exactly how things are in the mind of God. So we can begin to see his approach to things and begin to now say, wow, okay, perhaps this is exactly what God meant, which may be totally different from our ideas about things. Now we can begin to, if we attempt to measure time from the time that Adam sort of made that mistake to the time that Jesus came, at least a couple of thousand years must have passed, at least. So, which means even time is not enough to change an original idea. So, the original idea is always in the mind of the manufacturer. And that original idea is still always the truth about the product. I guess that's the bottom line of where I'm coming, what I'm arriving at this particular time. So, which means if we want to look at what was God's idea about man, because I think it's important to look at this for a start when we are talking about living effectively in kingdom culture, in the culture of a kingdom. Before I go on, I want to say that culture is the most important thing about a society. As a matter of fact, every society celebrates its own culture, which it will refer to as its way of life. In other words, this is how life is defined in this environment or in this society. So, if we talk about kingdom culture, how is life defined in that culture of the kingdom? That's why I thought it would be useful to look first and foremost about, let's even look at the idea of man in within a kingdom culture. So how does God view man? We can look at that vis-a-vis how Jesus treated man and begin to understand, right, what is really the mind of God about man. I may want to quickly maybe preempt myself and talk about something very quickly. I remember the time when maybe back in the Old Testament where there will be injunctions such as, look, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. So if you injure my eye, I've got to injure your eye again. If you injure my leg, I have to injure yours again. Now, the question begins to occur that, is this just an attempt to just avenge things and maim the whole society and create, you know, sort of handicaps all over the society? Was that what the intention really was? Now, this question is something that I've thought about a few times, and I think I'm getting closer to begin to understand slowly, but the intent of most of those injunctions. Now, and that's why I would think that it will be useful to look first and foremost at what really is the precept, what's the original idea of mine. Now, I've broken this down into a few categories. One of them will be, let's look at what really is the source of man. Now, the first thing we know about man was when we heard that statement, when he said, let us create man in our image and likeness. Now, I'm not quite sure if I haven't mentioned this before, but I remember in one of our series in the past, we discussed a bit about this idea of man and the image and likeness. The word image means characteristic. It means nature. And therefore, the word likeness indicates a mode of functioning. So it's the same way where it's the principle of genealogy. So that when you look at a man, maybe a man that gives birth, it would all circumstances be equal. The man will give birth to another human. Just the same way that a lion will birth another lion. So that lion cub is the image of the other lion. Now the sizes may be different, but it is the exact image. It has the same nature, and therefore it would behave naturally like its image. So we can begin to conclude that whatever the image of something is, it is expected to function exactly as such. Or let's put it this way, it would have the same genetic composition, the same content, the same capability, the same abilities as well. And therefore, because it has all of that, then it can function just like its source of origin. Case in point, if I make a chair out of a mahogany tree, now I expect that chair to have the same strength as mahogany. I expect it to have the same toughness as mahogany. If I make a key out of silver, I expect the same brilliance as that which exists in the source. So now this is the principle of image and likeness. So when it says man, is it talking about the male or the female, or is that a generic term? Now, we see that in the next line. So why did he make man? And what does he mean by man? Now, the first thing I saw is let them have dominion. So basically, that word man is a plural tense. So when we say man, it doesn't exactly mean male or female. It's actually talking about both. So let them means this is applicable to the whole species. And he says, look, the reason is this dominion. Let them have dominion. We talked about dominion a bit in the past series, which means rulership, which means administration, which means being in charge. Now, by the same token, there is a definition of the scope of their purpose of dominion. It says, look, it's only limited to fishes of the sea, which means the fish and the water bodies from where they come, the birds of the air, which means the birds and the various environment, the air that they come from, the animals of the fields, so that's the animal and their habitat, everything that creeps, so that's just creeps, everything that creeps upon the face of the earth, and whatever source or wherever they creep from, and over the whole earth. Now, I'm beginning to look at this scope, and something seems to be missing, which is that something that is out of scope is man. There is no place where it said, let them have dominion over man. Now, I'm talking about the precept of man because this is very vital in understanding how in kingdom culture we look at what is really the principle or the precept, which means the original idea about man when man originated. So man, we can rule that out in red ink, that man is totally out of scope of what mankind should have dominion over. In other words, no human should have dominion, as it were, over another man. Okay, now, if this is the case, what is the strategy? How should they have this dominion? It now says, let me tell you, first, is the word fruitful means be productive. So I say production. Something must be produced. Again, it said multiply, and that talks about growth or increase. So the second strategy in that chain of having dominion is growth or multiplication, ability to multiply what has been produced. The next thing is management, which means whatever you've produced that you are now growing, you must multiply. Why? Growth actually becomes ineffective without management. And whatever is not managed will stop growing and will just go out of existence. And it says, the last one is this, subdue, which is the word totally have this under control. I call it leadership. So in the mandate that produced mankind, according to kingdom concept and culture, all of this 4-pronged strategy is implied. Production or productivity, multiplication or growth or increase. In other words, nothing must remain at the same spot. If you have a plot of land where you are farming, increase that production and manage 2 plots, manage 3 plots and grow it. If you produce 1 iPad, duplicate it, create more of it, improve it, create a new version, grow it. And then as you do, manage it. Management is the introduction of order into what is produced. So manage it so that it's able to capture more value. As a matter of fact, management is intended to capture more value, to expand the value that is possible, that can be attracted to any production. And it says, you should do this until you are totally in charge of the environment where it is done and where you are the principal influence in that area. In other words, if I'm a producer of tablets, I should work until I become the dominant producer, the household name in that area. If I am having a school, I should become the dominant reference in that sphere. So that when we talk about Harvard, we don't need to ask questions. We know exactly what Harvard is. When we talk about, if I talk about other men that we know, if I say Bill Gates has produced something, is grown it, is managed it with his team, and effectively has become a leader, a household name in that area. Now, something that I want to quickly throw in here is that by the time we're talking about these levels of these strategic levels of having dominion, we begin to see that at a point, by the time you can do production alone, but by the time you get into the growth sphere, it begins something that you do with a team. By the time you go into management of it and leading in that area, it is something that can no longer be done alone by one man. So, and that is implied. I thought I should throw that in very quickly as we progress. Now, by that same token, something else was introduced, and that is the concept of law. Of course, in September, we spoke extensively about law, but we really can't exhaust it because it's too wide to exhaust. Now, mankind or man was told in that place that, look, you have freedom to obey and submit to divine authority. Otherwise, you have divine abortion. Now, the other time I was speaking about what happens when when we look at how computers work. And the thing that I want to quickly talk about here is, when you're talking about how computers work, we see something that when we okay, I want to talk about quickly when we create programming, the concept of programming in computers. Now, when we create a program, in the same place where we create that program, we write something that is called declaration, which is we set the environment under which the program can work. So we say, look, you need to talk about the various parameters that program will use to function. Once we have done that, we progress to say, now begin give the specific instructions that should be accomplished in order to perform the various operations in that program. So let's say I want something to count 1 to 10, and after it has done that, then put everything in a particular box, just for example. Now, so after we set the environment, we then go ahead to now write a series of instructions that accomplish a particular task. Now, when we do that, we actually enclose order between begin and end. I don't know how many people have done computing before, but I don't want to bore you with that. But there's somewhere I'm going. After we've given the series of instruction about how that program should work, we then go to the last part of the program, which is extremely important. We call that part the exception part. We call it exception handling, which is that should this program not work as intended, please perform so and so tasks, take so and so steps. Now, I want to let us see appreciate the fact that setting the environment, giving the instruction on what to do, and the just in case part of the program is all taken as part of the whole program. So which means even though the programmer believes in his ability to produce a program that works, he also says, just in case anything goes wrong, this is what you should do. Why is that important? That just in case or exception part is not because the programmer doesn't know what to do. It's just saying, I have to take care of emergencies. Now, in the same way, even though God believes so much in his abilities, he says, hey, this is the environment in which you're going to work, the Garden of Eden, as we call it. And it says, this is what you are to do. Your assignment is dominion. Do this and do that. But he also said in his mind, just in case this man malfunctions, you have to shut him down. In most cases, if you create a robot and you have done invested into it, you have an exception that's part of that robot design, that in case this robot takes a mind of its own, shut it down. Remove the power that makes it work. So that's the same thing that God did to man. He says, just in case this man decides to have a mind of his own, begin a shutdown process. It's exactly what we call that punishment that mankind, I will say it the way he said it. He said, in the day that you eat, if you are free to eat of every fruit in this garden, except just one. And in the day that you eat it, that day you die. Now, see, which means the freedom to choose life or death was entirely in the hand of Adam, or the mankind, whether they choose. So that's why I say law is actually the freedom to submit to divine authority or divine abortion, which means divine shutdown. So essentially, that's what happened. And it's just talking about the responsibility that mankind has when it comes to law. Okay, so this is very important, and I thought I would highlight that as we carry on. Okay, so so I've said that, yeah, the source, the purpose, the scope, the strategy, and law. But that's not all. Look at what he said. So I want to highlight these principles when we're talking about the value of man within the context of kingdom, as part of living in the culture of kingdom. In the first instance, I want to suggest to every reader that we should recognize that every human is God's image. That is principle number one. Which means, and this is where it gets a bit interesting. Now, when I say every human, that should be underlined actually. It means every human, regardless of creed, regardless of race, regardless of practices, regardless of behavior, is God's image. So which means the man who is a bit unfortunate at this time and is living under the bridge is God's image. The man who has just committed a crime right now is God's image. The man that somebody had an argument with just in the course of the day is God's image. The man who has another religion is God's image. Now, I can go on and on. Every human is God's image. That's why when God's idea expressed in human form began to talk, he said, look, you have heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. He said, but I tell you, I like the word I there. The word I is saying is a concept of divine authority. It says, I, the divine authority, I have the power to redress that law or to interpret it. I like a better word. It says, I have the power to actually restore meaning back to that law that you had initially. So it says, I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. I'm beginning to say this because when we talk about kingdom culture, this is where kingdom culture begins to really stand apart from most other cultures. In other cultures, the encouragement is, okay, if somebody is good to you, love the person. If somebody is really bad to you, okay, respond in kind. But in kingdom culture, it says, no, love your enemies. As a matter of fact, Pray for those who persecute you. Now, is it having a laugh, or is it asking for the impossible? Now it says, look, this is the reason why you should actually do it. Now, look at Matthew 5:45. It says, the reason is this, so that you can be the children of your Father in heaven. Now, we talk about kingdom of God, and we say that, look, is the idea of the government of heaven coming to impact earth. So he's saying, in doing that, you will actually be behaving like your Father who is in heaven. What does your Father do? It says your Father causes his own Son. Here is telling us who owns the Son. He's saying the Father actually owns the Son, and says he causes his own Son to rise on the evil and the good, and also sends his own rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. Look, it's beginning to get interesting, because this principle is so basic to, and it's at the heart of kingdom culture. Living in kingdom culture is the principle of the recognition of every human as the image of God. Okay, now let's look at another principle. The second principle is understanding that, yes, every human is the image of God. Now, because we also are the image of God, so it means every human is your and my image. That's the second principle. It's the principle that every man is your own image. Okay, let's see what it says. Now, don't forget, each time Jesus talks, this is not a prophet talking. This is not a priest talking. This is the divine authority talking now. This is the king. This is God's thought expressed in word and in action. Is God's thought expressed as a human. Now, let's see what it says. It says, and answering, he said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. In other words, he's saying, if you understand that every human is God's image, including you, so it means when you have a handshake with somebody, you have just have had a handshake with God's image. When somebody offends us, well, unfortunately, the image of God has just offended us. Now, the question is this: the image of God may be malfunctioning. In other words, it's not functioning like his image. The likeness and the image are totally out of sync, but it is still God's image. So it's just an image of God malfunctioning. Now, I want to read Romans 13:9. It says, do not commit adultery. Therefore, do not commit adultery, do not commit murder, do not steal, do not bear false witness, do not lust. And if there is any other commandment, in other words, the word commandment is law. He said it is summed up in this word. Look at that word again. Word, logos, expression of an idea. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. In other words, the essence of all of the law is to create a culture that promotes love among neighbors. Now, I just paused for effect. The sum total of law, like we said in previous broadcasts, is to create culture. And what is the culture that we are talking about? Is that every neighbor is to be loved as ourselves. Now, and of course, the master himself expanded and said, look, we're not just talking about your neighbor, we're also talking about your enemy. Let's look at principle 3, talking about the value of man still. It says, man's life is as valuable as the life of God, because it simply is. So every human life is actually the life of God expressed. Just about the same way that God himself also expressed himself in Yeshua, every human life is the life of God. Now, let's look at the injunction. It says, look, whoever sheds man's blood, his blood shall be shed by man. Why? For He made man in the image of God. Now, if everyone's, so which means effectively you've shed the blood of two people. Now, are we actually talking about the destruction of two lives? No. This is actually talking about the sanctity of life. So that you know that the only thing, and I'm going to come to that in a bit, that can represent another man's life is man's life. So, and that's why it says, look, I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life on behalf of the sheep. In other words, only the life of God can actually and properly represent the life of any human. It is impossible for the blood of sheep to represent the life of any human. Impossible. But it says, look, the yearling flees because it's just a yearling and does not care as to, it's not care for the sheep. And I also put that out. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. In other words, in order to buy back the world, don't forget, we said that the world has something in it. The world and the people that live in them. So when we talk about worlds, we're effectively talking about people, humans that live in those worlds, that operate in those worlds. So it's saying effectively that, look, in buying back the world, that is the people in the world, the only thing that can pay for it, the only value, true value for the life of the people in the world is my own personal self. Okay, now let's look at the fourth principle. And this, I call this the principle of equality, which says that equality and difference in valuation of worth cannot coexist. So which means we cannot be equal if we have different values, if our valuation of each other are different. In other words, if I buy something for £5 and somebody buys the same thing or something else for £2, then the value on each of them is different. And so they're not equal. If I see somebody, maybe somebody from one part of the world, as being less in value to me, if I value that person as being less in worth because of what it looks like, where it comes from, then we cannot have equality. Even though all human beings are equal and are born out of the same image, but the moment I value each life differently, then I've defeated the principle of equality. Okay, now I want to quickly dash through this. It's something that caught my eye as I was thinking about this. It says, if I speak with the tongues of men and angels, but I do not love, I've become so and so, sounding brass. I want to go to the last one, which says, if I give out all my goods, and if I deliver my body that I be burned, but I do not love, I am not profited anything. Now, my question is this: how is it possible to give one's body to be burned and not have love still? I thought about this for a long time, and it started to dawn on me that it's comparable to a man who has a dog, and the dog somehow got caught in a flood. Now, because of the love that this man has for the dog, he jumps into the water in order to, in an attempt to rescue the dog. Now, in doing this, the man somehow, unfortunately, got drowned. Now, if we say this in a layman's language, we say this man actually loves his dog. Oh, he loves the dog so much so that he actually gave his life for the dog. Now, the question will be, does he actually love the dog, or does he so much like the dog? Now, that brings me to the concept of value. Is the life of a dog equal to the life of a human? Well, we have different schools of thought on that. But if there's any difference in valuation, if by estimation of value, we're saying the life of a dog is not actually worth the life of a human, at least according to most laws that we have in our various countries, then we can say that he actually believes so much in his dog, places so much value in the dog, but the life of a human is not actually equal to the life of a dog. And so there's difference in value. And so we cannot actually talk about love in that context. Okay. So when he says, if I deliver my body to be burned and I still not have love, it's actually possible to sacrifice without love. In other words, if I go, maybe I use all that I have to buy some kind of relief materials for certain people who I just think, oh, these guys are not really as intelligent as us. They are from another part of the country or the world, and they're not yet human. They are still in some process of evolution. Now, I cannot really love them because by my estimation, I've reduced their value less than I am. So I may actually give them so much, and maybe in the process of traveling there, maybe something happens, there was an injury. The sacrifice does not really connote love because the valuation is different from the valuation that God places on that human. In other words, the bottom line is this: if we value any human life differently from how God values that life, our sacrifices to those people are irrelevant. The valuation does not measure up to what God values them as. So we cannot really love them, value them, estimate their value the same way that God does. So, and that's why I say that when there's a difference in valuation, then equality can really not exist. So I wanted to just talk about these few things, and I hope they are useful, because this for me is, if we don't sort out the valuation of human, every other thing that we say will really not make sense. For example, if somebody says love your wife, for example, well, that wouldn't be difficult, because once we've dealt with the value of human, every one of them has God's image. So therefore, it is easy to love God's image. Otherwise, if we begin on the precept of marriage, we will have missed on a fundamental principle of the value of human. So I thought we'll begin from here, and we will build on this one as we talk more about about living in kingdom culture. So I think I may just want to begin to round up here. This is actually the last slide, I think, on this one. Yeah. So I'll want to round up here, but I don't know if there's anyone who wants to just make a quick comment. If you use the tiny button to the top of your screen, I'm aware of time at the same time. So if you want to just make a quick comment, I will just bring us on so that we can just say something very quickly, and that would be really appreciated. It would be nice to hear other leaders speak. And then don't let us forget, we really actually want to learn from ourselves, all of our experiences, all that we are learning, especially from our senior citizens. So just to learn more so that we all can grow and have the opportunity to even revisit what we think we know, so that we can just become better as leaders. I don't know if there's any quick comment before we round up. Okay, if not, I just want to really appreciate everybody for coming tonight, or this is afternoon in the US now. So I just wanted to really appreciate everybody, and it's always great to see us being part of this from time to time. And I'm trusting that going forward, we'll be able to build more on this and have a properly and truly interactive session. My wish, oh, fantastic. I think I can see somebody indicating to speak. So I will just bring you on very quickly. So something might be happening to your screen. It's all for good. Yes, I can see Buki. So I'm just bringing Buki on now, so we can hear from her. So if you just look at your screen, I think it may take a tiny moment, but it will happen. Okay, I'm just bringing Buki on. I also want to formally introduce Tenny. Tenny is a co-presenter, just helping to make sure that the background things are running as well as they should. Tenny is actually my cousin. So other people know him as Tokwe Oshinkoya.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to be on tonight.
Okay, that's good. Great to hear your voice, Tenny.
Yeah, thanks.
I don't know if Bouquet is on yet. Okay. Okay, Bouquet. Okay, I'm still attempting to bring Bouquet on as it's just for us to hear a voice. But you see, I would also want to ask if anybody wants to come on as a presenter right from the outset. Just let me know. I would sort that out so that. Oh, fantastic! Now we have Bouquet. Hello, Bouquet. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Good evening. Good morning.
Good evening.
Good hello
We're
to
trying to
everybody.
see your face. Oh, fantastic. It's coming on. Yeah, if you move a bit to the center, we can see your face properly, and everybody can say hello to you. If you move maybe towards your, is it right now? Fantastic. Yeah, that's better now.
Oh dear. Okay.
Okay, we can hear your voice.
Okay. Hello everyone. I just wanted to make a point from what you said the last time, just a few minutes ago. You talked about the importance of seeing everyone as, first of all, as God's image, right? And
Yes.
that really struck me. That is so important because it gives a completely different perspective to everything else that we do.
Yeah.
If we see everyone as God's image, it removes everything that has to do with class. It
That's
removes
right.
everything that has to do with you feeling more superior to everybody else, and it helps you to more or less like relate with everyone
That's true.
as God's own, creation and God's own, as in relating with everybody in God's own image and everything like that. So I think for me, it really struck me, and that is really important. It's an important point for us to note, knowing that, yeah, first of all, everyone is created in God's image, and that's important. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I mean, great. I mean, I'm truly excited, Buki, for first hearing your voice. So it's not just Kunle speaking now, and then and then but that's so true because we all are God's image, and I think sometimes I think that's where the struggle is when we
Yeah.
don't see ourselves as all of ourselves as God's image. Then when we say love, it becomes a struggle because
Absolutely.
on what basis are you going to love that person
Mhm.
equally as yourself? There's no basis because in the first instance, they think everybody together. The common thread that brings us together is the fact that we all are God's image. So when
Yes.
we are not aware of that in the first instance, then
Absolutely.
it's impossible. We're going to be finding other moving targets to as measures of commonality, and they're going to be
True.
moving targets. So and that's why thanks for really highlighting that. And
Welcome.
well, I'm also still I'm going to say to in the front of everybody now that Buki will be our speaker shortly. I don't know when, but I think it's going to be very soon. And then of course Tenny also is going to be a speaker and he's going to present also. I mean everybody here we all are leaders, and I think it's important for leaders to speak. The whole essence of this platform is to help each of us to begin to emerge. I think that just like children have playgrounds where they begin to really learn about themselves and begin to assert themselves, and then as they grow into adulthood and so on, they've gone through processes of development. I think also if we see ourselves as emerging leaders, all of us really, we can have a platform where we actually share our ideas, concretize them, and present them, and we'll be surprised at what we already know
Yeah, true.
that can make a difference in somebody else's life. So,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I'm looking forward to everyone and everyone really stepping up and speaking. And it doesn't have to be 1 hour. It could be 30 minutes. It could be 20 minutes. It could be 45 minutes. So I'm very much looking forward to it, and we can have a truly participatory platform where we all share. So
Absolutely.
thanks very much, Vicky, again. Thank
You're
you so much.
welcome. All right,
Thank
good
you.
night.
Good night. Yeah. I don't know if anybody wants to just maybe one more comment or so. If anybody wants to share that, and we can quickly take that, and we can round up tonight. I'm also aware that we've kind of shoot a bit above our time. For people who might be available living around Manchester, we're having what we call Kingdom Breakfast meetings on Saturdays. So if you're interested in that one, just let me know, and I can send you a VIP invite so that we can just be part of that, and we all can all can sort of share together and discuss. It'll be like a discussion forum. So I want to invite us to that. If there's no other comment, I would just want to thank everybody once again for coming, and then it's always a pleasure to have everyone on board. And I know we can go on in greater strength from here. So thank you. We all are God's image. We all are each other's image because we are God's image. And so I know it's going to be easier for us to even extend the love of God to people as true leaders in having a truly effective kingdom community. God bless you, and see you next time, same time. God bless.